Alleluia, Alleluia, Alleluia. The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Jesus said to his disciples, "A rich man had a steward who was reported to him for squandering his property. He summoned him and said, 'What is this I hear about you? Prepare a full account of your stewardship, because you can no longer be my steward.' The steward said to himself, 'What shall I do, now that my master is taking the position of steward away from me? I am not strong enough to dig, and I am ashamed to beg. I know what I shall do when I am removed from the stewardship, that they may welcome me into their homes.' He called his master's debtors one by one. To the first he said, 'How much do you owe my master?' He replied, 100 measures of olive oil. He said to him, 'Here is your promissory note. Sit down quickly and write one for 50. Then to another the steward said, 'And you, how much do you owe?' He replied, 100 cores of wheat. The steward said to him, 'Here is your promissory note. Write one for 80. And the master commended that dishonest steward for acting prudently. For the children of this world are more prudent in dealing with their own generation than are the children of light. I tell you, make friends for yourselves with dishonest wealth, so that when it fails, you will be welcomed into eternal dwellings. The person who is trustworthy in very small matters is also trustworthy in great ones. And the person who is dishonest in very small matters is also dishonest in great ones. If therefore you are not trustworthy with dishonest wealth, who will trust you with true wealth? If you are not trustworthy with what belongs to another, who will give you what is yours? No servant can serve two masters. He will either hate one and love the other, or be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and mammon." The Gospel of the Lord. Well, you may be wondering about the camera, the man behind the camera. It sounds like an episode of some show. But it is not, don't worry, it's not the nightly news. You know, there's nothing dramatic going on here at St. Francis. And unfortunately, it's not Publishers Clearinghouse. Wouldn't that be nice, you know? But instead it is our retreat and our retreat master who has arrived, Thomas Paul, who is from India but living in Germany now, right? And he's visiting, he came to give a retreat to Mother Teresa's order in California. And on his way back in this direction, he has come to give a retreat for us. So it's an honor to have you here, and we welcome you. Following, toward the end of the Mass, he will be addressing us for a short period of time. In 1993, Steven Spielberg directed a movie that maybe you remember seeing. It won Best Picture, called Schindler's List. And this movie was based on a book called Schindler's Ark, which tells a story about a man who through his efforts, saved 1,300 Polish Jews from being killed in the Holocaust. Oskar Schindler was a very complex man. He was a failed businessman. He had a failed marriage. probably due to his excessive drinking, and he was a womanizer. His former wife described him as generally immature. And Oscar was born in 1908 in Czechoslovakia into a German family. And as the Nazis rose to power, he signed up with them. He saw an opportunity there to make lots of money. And so in Poland, he won favor with the SS, and he opened a factory, and he hired Jews to run the factory, not because he was so sympathetic to their plea, but because they were cheap labor. And as things got worse for the Jews, and they began to be rounded up and shipped off to concentration camps, that something began to change within Schindler's heart and in his life. And he began to see the brutality of this war and the way they were being treated. He saw their humanity. And so he proceeded over the course of 1 or 2 years to spend his entire fortune, over 4 million francs, or German Deutsch marks, or whatever they're using, in order to ensure the safety of these people, his workers. And even at the very end, I mean, he was bribing, paying people off in diamonds, these Nazis, and all of his money in order to try to save every last one. And the abiding question for the survivors, and even Spielberg asked this question a lot of other people, why did he do it? He could have escaped to Switzerland and had lived the rest of his life with this fortune. And he gave no clear answer to this question. It's been suggested that the answer may be tied up in his Christian roots, that Oscar had grown up in a strong Catholic family with parents who were deeply religious. Nearby, his neighbors were a Jewish rabbi and his family. 2 of the sons were Oscar's best friends. Schindler's attorney and a friend of his he spoke about him, he's now deceased, but with great affection. He said, "He drank, yes, he drank. He liked women, he bribed, but he bribed for good purpose. All of these things worked. If he were not this kind of person, he probably wouldn't have succeeded. Whatever it took to save a life, he did. He worked the system extraordinarily well. He was a true human being in the best sense of the word. His actions in those circumstances were absolutely extraordinary, and I know of no one who has matched them." His life really kind of parallels this parable that the Lord gives, this dishonest steward who uses the master's money in a way that he's a cheat, basically, but yet he is commended because he acts in a way that is prudent before all is lost. Right? He is able to get the most money, the most profit that he can. And so too, the spiritual lesson for us is that, and it was certainly for Schindler, is that even though he had squandered so much, he acted prudently toward the end of his life by seeing the value of true wealth. Right? It was in these individuals, these people whom he saved. And so too, what he clearly chose was over material wealth. What he chose was the wealth that God desires to help and to save others. to spend our dishonest wealth for, you can see how it was dishonest wealth for Schindler, but Jesus is speaking to all of us. Our dishonest wealth is all the earthly money, money, we think of even handling money, it's a dirty thing, right? Because all wealth is all passing away, right? It's fleeting. We use it for a purpose. But we must always beware of being attached to it, to cling to it, to love it. We cannot love it and love God. And so, we use our earthly wealth, our dishonest money, so to speak, in order for true wealth, for spiritual wealth. Thomas Paul was speaking about Mother Teresa of Calcutta. We were speaking about how, she used money, but always, what did she see? She saw the poor. She saw their dignity. She saw Christ in others. And therefore, when we see that, we're able to spend our money in a more free way, in a more generous way, to the works of the church, to the works of Christ, for the poor. Because in the end, right, when we meet the Lord, we can either be welcomed into heaven by all the people that we were able to help with our wealth, right, or we can't take it with us. And remember the words of the Lord who said, "What you have done to the least of my brothers and sisters, you have done it unto me." You've done it unto me. And so this is the great calling that the Lord wants us to be prudent with our money, but also to be generous and to love God above all things and our neighbor as ourselves.